Today, I'm going to answer a question that I received a couple times from a couple different people recently. And those folks are traditional artists who are getting into digital art, but they're not feeling like they're having much success with the digital side of things. And they want to know how to be as good at digital art as they are at traditional art. So I have some tips I'll share with you coming up next. Thanks for joining me today. I'm digital artist Aaron Rutten, and it is my mission to help artists like you enjoy digital art and learn some new skills along the way. And today we're going to be talking about how to be as good at digital art as you are at traditional art. I'm going to make this really straightforward and easy. Don't expect to be instantly good at digital art because it took you time to learn traditional art, right? I mean, just think about how long it took you to get good at drawing on paper, for example. You have to at least give yourself some time to adapt to drawing digitally. Had you given up in the early stages of drawing traditional art, you wouldn't even be watching this video right now, would you? So it's going to take time, but fortunately, you're not starting at zero. You have some background in art because you already know how to draw traditionally, so you have an advantage. And believe it or not, digital art and traditional art are very, very similar. They have differences, key differences that definitely separate them from each other. But for the most part, the skills that you learn drawing digitally or drawing traditionally are not all that different. If you're going to draw an apple, you're drawing an apple either on paper or with a stylus on a screen. It doesn't matter. You still have to know how to draw that apple. You have to know what color an apple is. You have to know what shape an apple is, etc. So the skills you learn from drawing digitally and traditionally are actually interchangeable. And in my opinion, I feel like it can make you a better artist to be able to do both. Now, I happen to be an artist who started with traditional art and then kind of more or less converted into digital art. I still do both. I'll still paint and I'll still draw with traditional media, but I prefer digital art. So coming from experience, I have some tips that I think will help you in your transition. First of all, try to find an art application that is more geared toward fine artists, such as Corel Painter or Rebelle or ArtRage. These applications have tools that mimic traditional media. So you'll have your watercolor brushes that work like you'd expect watercolor to. You'll have canvas textures. You'll have these things that make your artwork feel more tangible and look more like organic media. But at the same time, the way that the tools are presented to you or the workflows that you go through feel a lot more similar to how you would do it with traditional media. Versus there's other applications out there that are purely digital. And when you're drawing in them, you don't necessarily feel like you're making art. You feel like you're doing something completely different that's very foreign to you if you come from a traditional art background. So these applications that simulate traditional media really well, those are going to be your best bet. Once you've settled on an art application, then it's time to find some brushes that fit your style because there's so many brushes out there. There's hundreds, if not thousands of brushes, depending on which application you select. And then within those brushes, you can customize all these different settings to make your own brushes. Really what it comes down to is probably 90% of the brushes out there you're never going to use because they don't fit your style. If you don't ever do watercolor painting, you could care less about watercolor brushes, although maybe in some cases you might use one or two of them if you mix media together. But the point being is there are a collection of brushes that are going to work really well for your style. And if you can find those, it's going to make it so much easier to paint because then it's just like when you found the traditional brushes that you liked or the paints that you liked or the pencils that you liked. You found tools that you were comfortable with in the real world. You need to find those tools in the digital world as well. So if it takes experimenting with brushes to find ones that give the kind of look that you want, or it might even take customizing the brushes and making your own brushes or tweaking default brushes to get them to work the way you want. But you definitely want to pick out some tools that work well for you and stick with those and get comfortable with them and begin to develop techniques. Techniques are very important because you needed to learn techniques to be able to draw with traditional media or to paint with traditional media. You need to learn some techniques to do digital painting and digital drawing as well. Now, what I had to do is I had to make up my own techniques for the most part. I could try to translate techniques from the traditional art world into digital, and I've had some success with that. But for the most part, you just have to experiment with the brushes, experiment with the application, and eventually develop a technique that works for you. Your technique. Not my technique, not someone else's technique, but your technique. And once you've developed that, you're going to be a lot more comfortable painting. Now, that doesn't mean that your technique can't be influenced by my technique, for instance. You could certainly watch some of my tutorials and pick out the things that you like, pick out the techniques that I use that you like, and combine them with your own and develop your own style or your own technique. Now, in order to develop that technique, you need to practice and you need to make lots and lots of paintings. But what I would focus on is don't worry about creating finished content or stuff that you're going to share, stuff that you're going to sell. If you need to do that out of necessity, that's fine. but just focus more on practice. Draw a bunch of trees or draw a bunch of mountains or draw a bunch of people, and don't worry about those being finished pieces. Those are practice pieces. And once you get comfortable with that technique and that routine and you have some results that you like, that you're happy with, then you can start creating finished work. But developing your technique needs to take priority over creating content. People get too hung up on the content and then they get stuck because they don't know where to go or they feel like they're not making progress. They're spending too much time trying to create when they need to be practicing and honing their technique. You can still create art, just don't worry about it being perfect if you haven't mastered the technique side of things. Because once you've got a technique that you're comfortable with, creating content is going to be so much easier. You're not going to have to second guess yourself as much. You'll have a workflow that you follow, and you can just start cranking out art. So to summarize, what you need to do is you need to find software that you're comfortable with. You need to find tools within that software that fit your style and that you're comfortable with using. Then you need to develop your technique to have your own personal technique that you're comfortable with using. And then finally, you need to master that technique. You need to spend time practicing until you're so comfortable that it just feels natural to make art with that application and those tools, as natural as it felt when you were using traditional media. So keep at it, and I'm sure that with time, you'll come to a place where you're much more happy with your results. So there you go. Those are my tips for how to be as good at digital art as you are at traditional art. If you enjoyed this video and you found the information helpful, go on over to patreon.com/AaronRutten and join me on my mission to create more free resources for digital artists. And if you're new to my channel, make sure to click that subscribe button. That's the best way to get instant access to a lot more digital art videos like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.